Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Set 6. And today, what we've got for you is the next episode in our massive new series, The Big Seven. And what we do in this series is we get seven of the biggest content creators in the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake community, and we get them here to answer seven questions. It does what it says on the tin. It's standard. If you've watched a few of these now, you already know. If not, go watch them after this one. Now, today's guest is a guy that I've been speaking to for a long time. He interacts with me all the time on Twitter. He's got a lot of stuff going on, and he is the Well Red Mage. So I'm going to allow the Well Red Mage to introduce himself and let us know what it is he's got going on.
I've got stuff going on. Well, first of all, though, stuff. Thanks for inviting me to be on your series. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for being on. Definitely, it's massively appreciated.
Awesome. And so I took a break from burning bridges to be here. No, I'm just kidding. I also got a podcast relaunching, MageCast.
Yes.
Which the last episode was last year, October. So it's about time to bring it back from the dead.
It's been on a hiatus.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. And it took, honestly, a lot to bring it back. But I'm excited to welcome you to that show.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, so if we don't get Final Fantasy out of our system on this show, then we're gonna have a whole nother show where we can talk even more in depth.
Oh, there's plenty of Final Fantasy as that, and I mean, I'm quite sure as well. Like you take a more broad approach as well, don't you? Not just focusing on one game in the franchise, or not just seven. You kind of look at a lot of different games across a lot of different franchises as well, don't you?
Right, and we were kind of going back and forth earlier, and I was saying how much I respect the content that you create because it's very focused. Obviously, it's for Final Fantasy VII Remake, but you're doing very well focusing on sort of like theories and predictions of the future, and that's exciting. And so for me, Seven's not my favorite Final Fantasy. But
I know.
Important.
I can forgive you. I can forgive you.
No, it's one that's important to me. So I write on a variety of games. I speak on a variety of games. We recently relaunched our website as thepixels.com, the-pixels.com.
Link in the description.
Hey, thank you very much. We've got a bunch of different writers. We do hijinks on social media. There's a lot of hijinks on social media.
Gotta do the hijinks.
Yeah. So it's exciting right now. It's a fun, creative time to be alive right now. I think there's a lot of resources available. There's a lot of fun things that you can do as a creator. So Final Fantasy is not my focus. A lot of people are like, well, you're a Red Mage. You only do Final Fantasy. I'm like, no, I do talk about other stuff too. So.
I talk about all of the things.
Yes.
That's it. I wouldn't know where to start. Like with such a broad scope. Like I look at like YouTubers who do such a broad scope of content, and it's like, how do you keep it all in your head?
Yeah, and I mean, it's like I was thinking about it. I mean, I can't play everything, and my website can't cover everything either. Yeah. I mean, I can't even navigate my own freaking backlog. Never mind play every new release that comes out. But I can share my thoughts on what I have played and what I am playing.
Yes.
And so my focus has always been on the conversation, the analysis, the criticism, and trying to heighten that the art of conversation.
Sharing your experiences, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and inviting people to be a part of that too, because everybody's got opinions, right?
Definitely.
But I think if you dig down a little deeper, those opinions can become critiques, and there's gems there in people's brains.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think one of the things as well is like with like the vibe on social media, shall we say, over the last few years, a lot of people are scared to vocalize those critiques because you don't know who you're going to offend. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not even saying offensive opinions, just I don't like this character. Like, pitchforks.
Right. Yeah, people will take criticisms of a product personally.
Yes.
That's a whole other issue right there that we could absolutely address for an hour.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It is crazy though. Like you see it all the time, and like I'm one of those people that I have to resist saying something like, "No, don't involve yourself. Just walk away. Just walk away." Because then I end up in the argument then, and it's like, "Oh, why have I done this? Why have I done this?" But you learn. You live and learn.
Yeah. Self-censorship is difficult. Yeah.
It is. It's a tricky minefield to navigate these days. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But no, brilliant. Thank you for that. And like I say, all of the links to everything that Well Red Mage does is going to be in the description below. So make sure that you check all of them out. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight into the questions. So let's get to it. So the first question is, what was your first experience with Final Fantasy VII, or like the compilation, depending on which order you played things?
All right. So, like a lot of folks who run in my circle, I started with the first Final Fantasy VII, the first release on PlayStation. Back, we think it was late '97 in North America.
Yeah.
And it's a game that really floored me. It was not my first Final Fantasy. As I said, it's not my favorite Final Fantasy, but it is a phenomenal Final Fantasy. And I it makes me sick to see. It's got a lot of anti-fans. Let's say that, right? So it
people who just hate on it for the sake of hating on it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I usually say that's an anti-fan, where it's so famous that it must be hated by somebody.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those somebody.
People just resent that popularity in a lot of cases. Exactly. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's not at all just an issue just for Final Fantasy VII.
It's everything.
Yeah, that's a cultural issue.
Yes. We need to look at that.
Right. But when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, I don't think anybody could argue it's a perfect game.
Yes.
I think that it's also a very dated game. That's one of the things that I empathize with when I ask people to play the original, or I talk with people who are playing the original for the first time and they give up because they're like, I mean, let's be honest, it's ugly as sin.
Yeah.
It's
that 3D. It's that first wave of 3D, isn't it? Like, you look at the difference between 7 and 9.
Yeah. Right. 7 and 9 or 6 and 7. I mean,
6 and 7, yeah.
6 is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then you see 7, you're like, what happened? Well, what happened is the technology had to evolve, and it was in its infancy again.
Baby steps.
Right, baby steps, and you can forgive it that. But, like we were chit-chatting earlier, for the time,
yes,
that was mind-blowing. I mean, the FMVs, those cutscenes.
You've never seen anything like it, really. I mean, It's absolute madness. I remember just being floored by it, like, what's this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally fell in love with a lot of the characters and the world, and I remember discussing the game with schoolmates in the schoolyard, and it was, I think, a game that really defines an era. It was a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about it, in my age range at least.
Yeah.
I didn't talk to a lot of like 30 and 40-year-olds at the time, but it's not like today where it's like, yeah, right? I know, I was like 13, 12 or something like that.
Yeah, I think we will have been about the same age then, 85.
Yeah, 85.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go.
Good times. Oh, no, I love it. So, what would you say was the biggest way that Final Fantasy VII impacted you as far as being a game? So, like, I know that you'd already experienced Final Fantasy prior, and your favourite is 6. I'm pretty sure you've said that before at some point. And to be fair...
It's an easy guess, too.
To be fair, it's my second. Like, genuinely, it is a phenomenal game. I feel that if I would have experienced, because 7 was my first Final Fantasy, and if I'd have experienced them the other way around, it probably would be flipped, if I'm being completely honest. I think it just depends, like, where, which game you experience first, because they are just both on a complete different level to everything I'd ever played before. Like, at the point that I played it. So for me, it was a big change in my viewpoint on gaming. Like, I completely shifted from platformers and puzzle and sport games straight into the JRPG genre. So did it have a similar kind of impact for you in any kind of way, be it gaming or personally, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you raised a lot of interesting points there. One of them being that it's really this gateway into RPGs for so many people. And absolutely one of the things that it should be remembered for. I really credit Pokemon Red and Blue and Final Fantasy VII for bringing people into the realm of RPGs. I don't want to be that guy that's like, well, I was playing RPGs before it was cool. But on the Super Nintendo, I mean, I think the Super Nintendo was a killer platform for RPGs.
So good.
Chrono Trigger, obviously, I never shut up about Chrono Trigger. It had the 2 Final Fantasies, well, no, 3 Final Fantasies in North America.
Eventually.
Mystic Quest. Eventually. Mystic Quest 4 and 6, which were 2 and 3, of course, the confusing thing.
I'm so glad they stopped. I'm so glad
Oh
they stopped
yeah,
doing that. My God.
absolutely. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Breath of
Tom
Fire, though.
Hanks, so the Breath of Fire, great, great, great. Secret of Mana, plenty of great games.
Like literally, the second JRPG I played after 7 was Breath of Fire 3, and
Oh really?
that sits quite high on the rankings for me as
Oh,
well.
that's a
It's
phenomenal game.
such a good game,
Yeah.
except for the
Yeah.
desert. Forget the desert.
Yeah, yeah, forget the desert. So I think that that 7 is important in that regard. So for me, what always kind of drew me to RPGs
Yeah.
since the Super Nintendo were those stories.
Yes.
Going back and playing them as an adult, I can see that okay, yeah, they rushed this translation. They had to cut
Yeah.
things out of this translation. Secret of Mana is one that I replayed, and I was like, there's like chapters missing from this, but it's okay. It still gets its story across. It's
Yes.
still a great game. And that's the thing with criticism is one thing that I'm passionate about. To criticize does not mean to put down,
Yes.
in my perspective. To criticize just means to identify the intrinsic traits within these things and ascribe a degree of quality to them.
And that's how things improve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to have some element of criticism. It's not criticism for me to go on Twitter and just be like, Secret of Mana is a pile of trash.
Yeah, this is shit.
That's not the
No,
art of
but when it's
criticism at all.
constructive,
Right. Right, exactly. So with 7, that kind of was a natural progression for me
yeah,
from Super Nintendo, adoring those stories, into 7, which was spread across multiple discs, which felt at the time like the biggest story I'd ever played. And like you said, I was floored. It was
yeah.
amazing. So that to me was the thing that impacted me most with 7 was
Yeah.
how big that story was.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing when you like hear the stories of it coming together, like all the problems that they had in development, the way that they were just sneaking things in on each other into the game and stuff like that. For it to have come out in the state that it did was quite impressive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think so. I've had several people, so I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about
Yeah.
Remake in a little bit, but
Oh yes. We'll get there.
well, so some people have mentioned to me, I've complained about the whole episodic approach to releases of the Remake,
Yeah.
and people have told me they can't just re-release the whole Final Fantasy VII. It's too big. I'm like, what are you talking about? They released that on ancient hardware as one game, just spread out across multiple discs. They can do that if they wanted to.
It's just they've made the choice not to.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And with that choice comes things like plot ghosts, fetch quests, and so on and so forth.
Oh, fetch quests. Them fucking cats, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just sat there like, literally, I love the way that in-game Cloud reacts pretty much exactly how I was reacting, like, what is this shit?
Oh, he is a player.
It was beautiful. It's like they knew what they were doing. It's like, yeah, we're going to do this to you. Have that.
That's self-parody.
Yeah.
At a certain point.
It really was.
Yeah.
Oh, it really was. Right, where are we at now? So, in the compilation, Final Fantasy VII, there's a lot of characters in there. So, what I'm asking people to do is kind of try and narrow it down to which character is your favourite one in the compilation.
One character?
Yeah, it's tough. Okay. It's real tough.
Right. So I guested on somebody's podcast once.
Yeah.
And they introduced me as Moses, the Well Red Mage, writer, father, and Tifa lover. And I was like, Tifa lover is seriously my introduction on your show? Is Tifa my favorite character? Probably.
Yeah. It's a bit, I'm not going to lie, it's a popular choice. Like, a lot of people do gravitate towards Tifa.
Yeah, and people can talk till they're blue in the face about, derogatory reasons, perverse reasons why Tifa would be somebody's favorite.
And it says more about them to a certain extent.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's like, well, you're the one who pointed it out.
Yeah.
But to me, the character represents like a very sisterly, affectionate, and loving, but not in an overtly romantic sense.
Yeah.
And I think that they really could have like leaned heavily into the romance of that relationship. But I think it's nice that there's a kind of silent distance between the two.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, you're making me pick just one because I almost said.
Feel free to have some honourable mention.
Right. Oh, thank you. I almost said Kate Sith. I love mentioning Kate Sith because he also died but nobody remembers that.
You know
Kate
what?
Sith
I'll give you that one.
did.
It's a bit of
Everybody's
a,
like, "Oh,
it's a
Aaron's
sort of death.
noble sacrifice," and then Kate Sith is. What about Kate Sith number one? He gave his life for the party.
I love
Uh,
it.
I love the. I mean, it's a character that's not spent. There's not a whole bunch of time
Yeah.
spent with him, and I detest him in Dirge.
Oh
I
God.
detest his singular appearance in Remake, where he's like, "No,
So
they blew it
weird.
all up." And I
Like
was like, "What are you doing?"
a lot of us were hoping that we'd get a degree of context for that, you know, in the intermission DLC, like just something to explain why.
Yeah,
Why can't
why?
Reeve be stood at a window in the Shinra building doing exactly the same thing?
Right. Why would I mean unless and here's the thing is in the original I'm like is Reeves like does he have some kind of personality issue? Is
Yeah,
there like some schizophrenia or something to where he can disassociate one personality from another within this character that
that'd be
he's remote
interesting.
controlling? So to me, like I don't know, but the game doesn't spend
Yeah,
enough time with that character for you to kind of develop
yeah, it's like a weird 3 second cut in the game, and then that's it. Gone.
Right.
It's
I
like
love just how weird he is. I love that he's a freaking what is it? A robot cat on a Moogle doll magically brought to life,
controlled
being
by a guy.
controlled by a guy. Like it's, I mean, if
It
you have
is
to think
quite
of
eclectic when you think about it.
yeah, I mean, if you have to think of the weirdest Final Fantasy playable character, that's up there. That's up
Yeah,
there.
yeah. This is like Quiner tier.
Yeah,
Gao tier.
yeah. It's so he's a favorite. I don't know if I put him above Tifa. It might depend on the day of the week on that.
Yeah, fair. And this, yeah, it does. A lot of opinions do kind of depend on what mood you're in sometimes, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
like music, I will go to different types of music depending on what type of mood I'm in. I suppose the same can be said about characters. You'll gravitate more one way or the other, depending.
Yeah, like when this show comes out, I'll probably be like, I should have said Red 13. Darn it.
No love for Sid, man. No love for Sid.
Oh, Sid's great. Sid's great. He likes his tea.
I can't wait to see what they do with Sid. It's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, hopefully it's good. That's all I have to say about that.
Now, we're going to step into remake territory for a moment, then step back out of it, and then jump in. So, the first question is, and it's a bit of a big step, how are you feeling about remake so far?
Yeah, tough. So when you asked me to be a part of this
Yeah.
series, I was immensely honored, delighted to talk with you. And then it dawned on me, I was like, I wonder if I'm his guest that dislikes Remake the most. Maybe.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially. So
I am
do I
looking at
flat
doing a second run of this, and there'll be a couple of other people who are in the same kind of ballpark.
Okay. And I've at one point I was making a brand out of just teasing Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I remember.
I had to dial that back.
It
Yeah,
was good
you're like, I
times, good
remember.
times, good times.
Yeah, the memes were great, right? So do I flat out abjectly hate the remake? No.
No.
Do I feel lied to about the remake via its title and via statements the developers made prior to its launch? Sure, because I think that genuinely it's not a remake.
Yeah.
And I think you and I see eye to eye.
100%. I mean, that was when I finished the game. That was my biggest stumbling block. Like, where's my remake? This is a sequel.
Right, and so I'm excited for what is it, Ever Crisis?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
looks like what could have actually been a remake.
I'm slightly
All those people
concerned. I'm slightly concerned about the mobile thing.
Yeah.
I'm worried about gacha, but narrative-wise, hopefully we get everything in there. Yeah.
Right, especially if they can put the whole compilation together
Yeah.
in a sensible way that's an
Yes.
actual remake
And
not
present
just-
it well as well. Like that's the
Right.
thing, because a lot of the issues with the compilation, the concepts were good, but the delivery and the presentation was just so bad it killed it.
Yeah, you're like, what the heck am I watching? Shonen over here? This is ridiculous. Like Advent Children.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do love that fight though. You see it and it's like, let's go.
So with the remake, I was super excited for it under the pretense that under the
A remake.
assumption that it was a remake.
Yes.
Now that I know what it is, having played part 1 or whatever they're going to call this in retrospect, I'm not super excited for things like intermission or part 2. I guess they've stated now that part 2 will dramatically differ from the story and be more like a road trip kind of thing. I'm sure you stay on top of the news more
There's
than I do.
mixed feelings on it. So what they're saying is they have said that there's going to be a lot of differences in it, in the same way that there was differences in Midgar. So it's not so much going to be the story's going to wildly deviate. Or this is what they're saying at least. The story was not going to wildly deviate, but something different might happen when you get to Calm, or something different might happen when you get to the Mithril Mine. But then everything else will continue as per. I personally am calling bullshit on that. I think there's going to be a big deviation at some point, and I mean, there's the obvious deviation point, which is someone not getting stabbed. But there's others as well. There's a few other different deviation points, and I think the more small changes that we see in the narrative, it's going to butterfly effects. Basically, it's going to become more and more separate from what we know. So that's kind of how I'm feeling. They're saying one thing, but it's probably going to go the way you're saying.
Right. A couple of things come to mind. I mean, were they going to raise the topic of plot ghosts and then just entirely dispense with them? Or are we going to see something like that?
I think we'll see him again. I think we'll see him again.
Either are we going to see them again, or are we going to see something analogically like them?
Well, I've recently done a video. No, but one of my theories regarding it is with the survival of... Oh, spoilers, by the way. With the survival of Zack, I feel like there's a potential that the planet's kind of co-opted him as a replacement for the Whispers almost. So when the Whispers have been absorbed by Sephiroth at the end of Remake, we see Zack survive, and there's a lot of things to indicate that he may not be alive in the strictest sense of the word, that he may be existing in the live stream as he does in Advent Children. And from there, he's going to have some sort of input. I mean, obviously, it's all massive speculation, but that's been kind of like my theory recently, that he's kind of become that analog for the Whispers that you were referring to a second ago. Not that he's going to end up getting the cloak on and jumping about, but, you know, he'll act, he'll act in a similar manner, though. He'll be trying to repair the timeline rather than stop the changes. I think that's going to be what it is. But it's... Who knows? Who knows?
And so they've said, you know, they wanted to make something that honors the original and at the same time surpass expectations.
Yes.
Do I think that's a necessary element of a remake to surpass expectations? I don't think that necessitates the kinds of changes that were made.
Yeah.
So one of the most frustrating arguments that I always see about Final Fantasy VII Remake, in short, is just when I'll complain about plot ghosts or about you know, the fetch quests or the hypersexualized massage scene that's in Walmart.
I love that.
I'm just like, what the heck am I watching? Or one of the worst rhythm mini games I've ever played, or the high five sequence, or the cats, or stuff like that.
I love the high fives. I wasn't a fan of the mechanical arms. That got so annoying so fast. My God.
It's filler.
Yeah, 100%.
So when I complain about something like that, people will be like, well, I mean, that's your fault for expecting a 1-to-1 remake.
No, yeah, I say that all the time.
It's not, because, folks, they announced that they were making a remake and it was going to just be in Midgar and it was going to be a full AAA release.
Yep.
That is not like a 5 to 10 hour game where you're just replaying exactly the original section,
going through those same steps exactly.
Right. So we always knew there was going to be additions to expand that size, but it does not necessitate the kind and quality of additions that have been filled in.
Yeah, I mean, this is it.
That's my big concern.
You've got, like, see, the two that grate on me the most, definitely the mechanical arms in the collapsed expressway. It's just so painful. And the sewers, the fact that you go through them twice as well, because you go through them once, like initially when you first fight Apps after Don Corneo, and then you've got the thing with Leslie as well, haven't you? So you have to go through that twice.
Right. Now and then
But then you've got characters like Roche who turn up for 5 minutes and never appear
right,
again.
yeah, right.
Why not
Like
do something there?
when that motor sexual showed up, I was like, what the heck is this doing here? Like what am I playing? What is this? And then he disappears, and they're like, this doesn't have any bearing. Now, are they gonna bring him back as kind of like a Team Rocket every episode?
Yes.
Probably.
Oh, that's gotta be it now. Roche blasting off again.
Right. Blasting off
Yes.
again. Okay, yeah. You can't kill him because he's a cartoon, he's immortal.
Oh, I love it.
So I've got a lot of concerns with. I loved Final Fantasy VII Remake when it was an authentic scene. I disliked it when it was something that they clearly just pulled out of thin air.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that I disliked was when they fake kill Barrett.
Yep.
Right.
It was
and he gets
weird.
stabbed in the back and comes right back to life, and I was like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah, because the
You want to
teasing.
take
Yeah, they're
yeah.
showing the lack of concern and lack of importance there is on a
Right.
death. Yeah.
Yeah, as far as foreshadowing, that's bad. As
Yep.
far as removing tension out of your narrative, that's bad. So, I mean, is that leading up to the big death? Are they like you're gonna have in the next one is Red 13 gonna get stabbed in the back, and the next one is Tifa gonna get stabbed in the back, and just do it over and over again? Because what is the point of
Yeah.
showing us that? Yeah, it is weird. I don't know if there's some big aha moment that's coming that'll have it make sense, or if it's just clumsiness.
Would be.
One of the disconcerting statements that I've seen from the developers is that they don't know they at one point
They said it. Yeah.
they didn't know how many episodes it was going to be. That's for a finished story that they're remaking. How do you not like
At
outline
least,
the plot?
yeah, you've got to at least have an idea at this stage. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, yeah, we're probably
Right.
going to do 3.
And so in writing, authors all the time will be like, well, are you a plotter or a pantser? Man,
Yeah.
they're a pantser. Like they're pantsing their way
Yeah.
through this thing. And so I think by the end there's going to be things that will show that
Yeah.
they were pantsing. As far as the identity of the Whispers and what they represent, I'm very much in the camp that they represent the fan base
Yeah.
that wanted that original remake
Yeah.
to be authentic. And when I finished that boss fight, I was like, dude, the like penultimate boss fight in this game is me, and I don't like it.
What's going on?
Right, it's weird.
HP's
like,
going down.
You want an authentic remake? Well, here, go fight yourself. And I was like, oh no.
Oh no.
So it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It's fascinating as an idea.
It's the same thing as the compilation. I think it's all going to be in the delivery. Like, it's an interesting concept, but it could go either way. Like, if they could deliver junk, or they could deliver something phenomenal. And I think the thing that worries a lot of people is, in recent years, the games that have come out in the Final Fantasy franchise have given people a lot of reason for concern. 13 wasn't the best in most people's eyes. 15 had issues as well. So what's that, like 7 years worth of being a bit disappointed for a lot of the fan base? And then you're coming into this new remake of one of your favourite games, potentially, and it's a bit different, and there's all this new stuff that they're trying. So yeah, I can 100% see where people's concerns lie. 100%.
Yeah. So I think the best that you have right now is, I mean, no doubt it's a popular game.
Yeah.
There's people who became fans of 7 because of this,
which is good.
Right, which is great. And I don't mean to gatekeep. So people are like, we don't want you in our fan base. Be like, I'm not a part of a fan base. I'm just a guy who likes video games.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my perspective on it.
That's the tribalism thing kicking in, though, isn't it? Everyone gets
all that sort of
crazy with it.
Right. So I think that what we're left with now is what could have been a remake of one of the most beloved RPGs of all time ended up being a somewhat, not very, but somewhat divisive game in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because you'll see people on Twitter, beyond just myself, some people adore it, some people detest it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of grays in between.
And there's a lot of backlash to it. Like Night Sky Prince, he took a lot of backlash. And Soldier First Class, they were in the same sort of camp that you're in the same sort of camp that I've become slightly more optimistic, but I think that could potentially be the nostalgia kicking in. I don't know. It's possible. For me, it's a case of I'm going to be optimistic about it, but if they disappoint me, there will be thunderous rage. I think that's
Right.
where I'm at with it.
Right. And that'll depend a lot on part two, how
Yeah,
that lands.
definitely. But the amount of backlash that they took and the shit that they got from people in the community, like, oh, you don't like 7 Remake, it's like, well, no.
People with differing opinions exist. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
get used to it. Live with it. Welcome, welcome to the world. Welcome.
Yes. Welcome to civilization.
Yeah, it is baffling. But I think the more people call it out, the more it will be diminished. That's the hope, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
That's hopeful.
the next one's going to be an interesting one. Now, I kind of have a bonus question for you on this one as well. I'm sneaking one in.
Okay.
In Final Fantasy VII, there's a lot of music, a lot of good music in the compilation. Is there a track in the Final Fantasy VII compilation that stands out to you more than any? Like, what would... I don't want to say favourite, but yeah, favourite.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough question. Dude, I learned to play piano because of Final Fantasy VII.
No way.
Taught myself how to play piano largely because of 2 Xanarkand and several
Nice.
different themes from Final Fantasy VII. Because I mean, I just think they're so endearing.
Yeah.
They're so wonderfully written. They're so melodic.
If there's one thing that you
amazing.
can say about pretty much the entirety of the Final Fantasy franchise is Uematsu and the team just smash it.
Yeah, and I
every
mean,
time.
you know, you brought up 13 earlier. 13's not. So I'm not in the camp where it's like 13 can go to hell. No, forget. You know, it's not my favorite game. You're raising your hand. It's not my favorite game, but I think you feel Uematsu's absence largely.
Definitely.
In 13. So as far as 7 though, I think there's so many great tracks. So many great tracks.
It's a mean question. It's possibly the meanest. It's possibly the meanest question, other than the character one.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say Genova.
Yes.
Because I could literally listen to that 10 hours nonstop and just it. Every time I hear it, I'm like, well, now I have to listen to the whole.
Yeah, this is it. It's like, I'm playing it now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's it. Settle in, kids.
Yes, such a great battle theme. Amazing.
Now, bonus question. What about 6?
What about 6?
What's your favourite music track from 6?
Oh, favorite music track from 6?
Yeah.
Oh, Dancing Mad.
Yeah. I had a feeling it would be. It pretty much is for everybody. That's why I was quite happy to just slide that one in there. Like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do this.
I mean, it's like you mentioned that earlier. Like, obviously 6. So, like, again, day of the week might be 9. My favorite might be 6. My favorite might be 7. My favorite. Yeah. But if you're going to ask me what the best is, I'm going to say 6.
Yeah, because it hit a peak of refinement.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then within 6, if you're talking score, Dancing Mad is right at the top.
Boss battle.
He just cut loose. Yeah, fantastic.
It is the perfect accompaniment to that boss battle as well. It's just like playing through it as an experience. If you've never played 6, play it.
Yes.
Just play it. Absolutely. The opera as well, that's got to get an honourable mention.
Oh,
yeah. Locke's theme as well, I quite like Locke's theme.
Oh man, there's so many great.
Yeah, it's the same with 7 as well. Like Sid's themes, like the slightly more acoustic version of Sid's theme. That's so good. Yeah,
oh, it's so good.
It's just Uematsu. The guy's a god.
Right.
He's literally
hundreds and hundreds of tracks for all these games.
Over 30 years, 35. How old's the franchise now? 32 years, something like that. Yeah, it's madness. Crazy. Just that level of consistency. It's amazing. Right, so we're going to jump back into remake territory now. So,
already?
With the fact that you are not as enamored with the game as everybody else is, shall we say, what would be something that you would hope for going forward? So, what could they do to bring you back on board, so to speak?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Sneaking them in.
No, it's difficult. It's difficult. Like you said, sort of like, so I think you said butterfly effect earlier. It's kind of like a snowball. You know, if you make small changes at the start of a story, those turn into arcs, those turn into themes, those turn into different paths and subplots and threads that will come to affect the entire project.
100%.
I mean, like we say, you can't just wipe out plot ghosts. There's going to be something there that's either similar or identical.
Yeah, and even if there's not, there's going to be some ramification. Like Sephiroth's going to have some additional scope now, some additional ability or something like that. There's definitely going to be an impact, 100%.
Because if we're fighting Sephiroth at the end of each one of these episodes, it's not going to be all that climactic if you're fighting Sephiroth at the end of the story.
It's going to be 3 Sephiroths. There's just going to be 3 of him. Super Sephiroth team.
No, it's just the Sephiroth that you fight in Kingdom Hearts 1 in the arena. That's the final boss, Sephiroth.
No. I spent too long on that fight. I don't even like the game, but I mean, I tolerated it, and it was mechanically I enjoyed the game, but narratively I was a bit, what's all this shit? But you know, once you start a game and you get that obsession and you get into the mechanics with it, it's like, well, I've got to do these things now. Oh, there's a Sephiroth fight, is there? Right. And bad times.
So, man, in a really roundabout way, to answer your question.
Yeah, it's tough. It is a tough one, to be honest.
No, it is, yeah.
Because in the same way that the changes snowball, so can your opinion snowball.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I don't want to think in terms of I'm beyond redemption.
Yeah.
You know, and I could never enjoy this series again.
Yeah.
And clutch my pearls and leave.
Oh yeah.
I would love to play the next one. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to get it day one.
Yeah.
Like I did with this first one.
Oh, yes.
But I would like to play it, like to see. If I had a PS5, I would probably play Intermission.
I know that feeling.
Right. But as far as what they could do to sort of bring me back, and maybe the people who share similar sentiments, is just a gesture toward authenticity.
Yeah.
I think if you call it a remake, it should be a remake, and not a fan fiction or remix or a reunion or all the crazy requel. Yeah, all the crazy.
That's possibly my favorite one, requel, because it kind of is a requel, but that was one of my biggest contentions with it, calling it remake. Like, I get the little fun wordplay thing they're doing. Oh, Sephiroth remaking the timeline and all that shit.
Yeah.
And I get what they were looking at, but it pissed me off. It genuinely did. It pissed me off. Right. And a lot of others as well, like 100%. And it, like you say, it will have misled people to a certain degree, because not everyone keeps an eye on the news and the updates like we do. Mm-hmm. So they will have gone into this blind expecting Final Fantasy VII remade. Let's go.
Right. And I think that by the time you get to the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's no longer Final Fantasy VII. It is similar to Final Fantasy VII, but I think at a certain point So I like to ask a question. At what point would this no longer be 7 in your estimation? And to me, it's no longer 7.
Oh, so for me, it's no longer 7. It's a sequel. It's a continuation. So the cutoff point for me, like as I was playing through it, there was some concerns that were going like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Why is Sephiroth doing this? What are these cloaky things? I mean, I was happy for the additional things like, I quite like the way they worked the, in the reactor bombing, where the bomb just kind of blows up, does nothing, and then Shinra's like, hit that. And Heidegger just wrecks everything. I liked that. That was good. Yeah. It amped up how twattish Shinra are. But I think the point where it kind of stopped being, probably the drum. You know, when you bump into Sephiroth in front of Genova's tank, and then Cloud falls down and you go through all of that. At that point, I was like, yeah, there's something extremely different going on here.
Right.
This is not how this pans out. I shouldn't be bumping into Sephiroth at any stage. Like, I don't see Sephiroth for... I mean, when is the first time you actually see him? It's the boat, isn't it? First time you actually see him, I think, is the boat to Junon. But before that...
because it's just flashbacks.
Yeah, you get the flashbacks. You see the Midgar Zolom. You see his wake, but you don't see him.
Exactly. And it's sort of like, so I've compared Sephiroth to Jaws.
Yeah.
Where you don't get to see the monster in the first 5 minutes.
And he definitely is 100%.
Right. So I think that, I mean, the thing is, we could argue about the quality of those changes, but what we can't argue about is that they're real changes.
Oh, they exist, 100%.
They exist.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's one thing in the original to have all these people talking about this mysterious, legendary soldier, and then Cloud tell the story, and then you're like, wow, Sephiroth. versus
badass.
versus in this, and again, this is my perspective, having played the original first, that he's overshown too much.
Yeah, I feel that.
Without much lead up to it, without much tension to it. So he just kind of pops up everywhere. You turn around, the old lady at the market is
Yeah.
Sephiroth, you know.
The guy in the black cloak when you stood around the kids that do the whack-a-mole thing.
Yeah.
All the flashbacks that he has as well. Like, I mean, I get what they were trying to do with it, bringing him in, but they've definitely oversaturated him. And like you were saying before, if he ends up being the boss for each installment of the game, you'd be so fed up of seeing his face by the
Right.
end of it. Like, I love him, but
Right.
you know what I mean? It's going to overexpose him.
At
And
a certain point, there's too much Sephiroth.
yeah, it's going to kill the impact of him because, I mean, you barely see him in the original game.
Mhm.
Barely see him. And the impact of him is so grand, like in comparison to what it is at the minute. But yeah, I'd say for me, the drum was probably that cut off. That was where, because you see him earlier and you've seen him a lot, but you actually stand in front of him, in front of Genova, like you've interrupted him in the middle of what he was trying to do. Or, see, I think there's a possibility. Like, I personally think you've got the two Sephiroths. You've got Advent Children Sephiroth, and then you've got the Sephiroth that's native to this timeline. I think that is Advent Children Sephiroth intercepting you so you're out of the way when his present time self turns up and takes Genova. That's kind of what I think. Yeah, that's kind of what I think's going on there, and it's too much Sephiroth, too much. Too much.
And I can sympathize with them because, you know, they wanted to do just the Midgar section, and if they did that in an authentic way, then
there'd be no Sephiroth. Yeah,
right.
You'd see his sword just wiggling in Shinra's back.
Right.
That's
and
it.
It's like maybe you want to see him, and from a business perspective, maybe you want to use this hyper popular character in your game, but somebody needed to be there to say you need to tone it down a little bit.
That guy is Hironobu Sakaguchi, and he's not been about for a while, unfortunately.
Exactly, and that's another thing when people want to bring up that this is just the story that they always wanted to tell way back in '97, but they couldn't because of hardware limitations. No, it's not. This is not the same exact creative team.
It is
working
different.
On Remake.
It is different.
It is different. I mean, Sakaguchi was part of VII, and he's not here now.
Like, genuinely, like the heart of Final Fantasy, almost. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
the father of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, most people's favorite game was overseen by him.
Right.
I would say. I would make that. I would go out on a limb and say that most of our favorite games as Final Fantasy fans were overseen by him, because was it 10 was his last involvement, was it, or was it 9? I think it was 10.
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
It was one of the two. It was one or two. I think it was 10. And then he went off and did the Mistwalker thing and Lost Odyssey, which was an amazing game as well on the Xbox. Such a good game. But yeah, it's an interesting question. So I know it's going to be tough for them to win you over. You know what I mean? I get that, definitely, because once you're on that slope, it is a slippery slope. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's easy for you to go from a point of, I'm a bit concerned about that, to, oh, that's pretty bad, to, oh, I fucking hate this. Do you know what I mean? You can quite easily go down that slope. I mean, one thing that I hope is that they do stay as true to it as possible, but it is definitely going to diverge, 100%. And for me, one of the big things that I did was I framed it as a sequel. And once I'd shifted my perspective, like, no, it is not a remake, it is just a sequel, things changed a little bit for me and my perspective lifted a little bit. And if it comes down to it, when Remake's said and done, and say it is trash, say that the whole thing finishes and it's trash, I can just forget the compilation and I've got Final Fantasy VII still.
Yeah, the original still exists.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. That is 100% where I'm at with it. I'm just going to run with it, see how it goes, try and be as positive as possible, which they've not ruined it for me yet, and I'd like to think they don't. Like, compared to 13 and 15, it's head and shoulders above in quality and everything like that. And I suppose a large degree of that comes from the source material existing already. They've already got those shoulders to stand on, so to speak. But they could easily have messed it up entirely at this point. And even most of the people that I've spoken to, at least, that have hated the game, loved it 90% of the way through. And then it fell off a cliff. That's literally, they get to the drum or the highway and it falls off a cliff for them. So I do have optimism, but it's cautious optimism. Let's put it that way.
That's good. I think that's healthy. No,
Yeah.
it's a great way to look at it.
Now, this is going to be an interesting one. The last question is, I'm asking everybody this. I want you to make one prediction about what's going to happen. So we've just done what you hope happens, but do you have an idea in your head of something that you think is definitely going to happen in the story going forwards? It can be anything. I'm not going to pin you into like answering a specific question, like what's going to happen with Zach or anything like that. But whatever you think, just a prediction, something. Just so I've got it on record and I can come and find you at a later date.
Okay. You know where to send the royalties then.
Yes.
Gold Saucer DLC.
Ooh.
No, I don't know.
No, that's an interesting one.
Well, because you think, are they really going to spend that length of time in an open area where you could just play mini games in today's atmosphere? Or is it just going to be like, hey, just go around getting mushrooms for this guy?
FF7 Remake Online, all in the gold saucer. Let's go.
That's sort of like Final Fantasy 14 status at that point.
Yeah.
So, more seriously, though, I think that what we'll see going forward is a continued emphasis on linearity.
Yeah.
As you and I both know, the Midgar section in the original is linear.
Yeah, it's the tutorial.
Right.
It is pretty much the tutorial,
it's the prologue of the story.
Yeah.
Now that we're out of that, and bear in mind, I mean, given the added footage that is in intermission now or intergrade, I can't keep track of all the inners. In the original, when you get out of that prologue section, and you reach that grassy area for the first time, what a breath of fresh air.
Beautiful. Like Fallout 3 vibes when you come out of the vault for the first time. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. Yeah.
Now, in this, you're not going to get that.
No.
Because...
Well, we're already beyond that now, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, with that added footage, we can see them walking through what looks like a desert now.
Yeah.
So...
Not as grey as I imagined it.
No, yeah. It's I'm like, man, shoot, this looks like California that I just left. But I think, though, that we'll probably see a continued emphasis on linearity, and then that's the format, if you will, or the direction of the kind of story that they want to tell. So it won't be so much, oh, let me backtrack to this city, or let me go here or there. And right, and that's not a qualitative statement. That's not like, oh, linearity is bad. Or
no, definitely not. Look at Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X is a very linear game, and it's amazing.
Right. And then look at Final Fantasy 13.
Yep.
I mean, it's also a very linear game. I think their linearity is different in that in 13 you're kind of just like running headlong down hallways without stopping.
Yeah, whereas there's a lot of diversion in 10, isn't there?
Exactly. You have towns and people to talk to. That goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely.
So in 7 Remake Part 2, I think we will see that direction. Where it'll stop, I don't know. But I think we'll continue to see a very linear path.
See, it's interesting because there was a video done just recently by Final Fantasy TV where they were saying that the world map that we had in the original game will not be realistic, because if they scale everything up to realistic sizes, it's like 50 miles to Cartham. Have fun. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. So
right.
Realistically, we are probably looking at interconnecting zones. So are you thinking something maybe like 12 or like 10 maybe?
Oh, interconnected zones. I see what you mean.
10, to drive you forwards,
Yeah, you can kind of hop along areas or zones or regions, probably. I mean, I doubt that they're going to have us like run through a wilderness without a car like in 15. Just like...
Do you think it's going to be like 15 where we're just rolling around in the car?
I personally don't think so. I would also hope it's not like 15 in that regard, where they just plop you in a big open area and we're like, all right, have fun. Catching frogs. Yeah. So I don't think it'll be like that. I think, it'll more resemble 10 in its linearity, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see how it goes, but I do agree with what you're saying there in a lot of ways about like they're going to push that linearity of the story, because it seems like they've got, regardless of what they've kind of said about, oh, we don't know how many parts it's going to be, they've definitely got some sort of narrative message in mind that they're trying to push to. And I think if they let us deviate too far off that message could get lost a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think they are just going to try and push it as almost as laser focused as possible. You know, like you'll have a little area, and in that contained area, you'll do side quests, but potentially no running off to materia caves and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And it could be
Right.
something they re-implement later on, like with Final Fantasy X. You know, with the airship, where you've just got a list basically.
Right, right, of places to visit. I think that, in the original, Midgar was the prologue. Here, Midgar is the precedent,
Yeah.
not really the prologue, because it's a full game
Oh
in
yeah.
and of itself. So, but I think that it's setting a lot of things as far as tonality, so one of the things, speaking of tonality, one of the things that shocked me in 7, so small, and
Yeah.
it's nothing to complain about, but it is a change. When you get purple glowing ooze from Genova
Yeah.
instead of a streak or a trail of blood,
Yeah.
and the song is called Trail of Blood, if I
It's just
recall
weird.
correctly. Now it's called Trail of Glowing Purple Ooze because the original, if you were to just remake that, it's bloody.
Oh yeah.
It's got some rated M stuff.
Oh,
Obviously,
yes.
they didn't want to release Final Fantasy VII Remake as a rated M game
Yeah.
with
Cuts
like
off a lot.
realistic
Yeah.
smears of blood everywhere, but that necessitates certain kinds of changes. So
But then they've
tonality
brought the blood
changes.
back in intermission, which is
That's what I
yeah.
heard. Was like, so why not just wait and do
And
it?
I'll be honest with you, there's a scene towards the end of intermission where a certain someone has a bad day. Spoilers. And it's pretty gruesome. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It is pretty aggressively gruesome. So it is weird how they did that. Like even if it had just been like they wanted to retool Genova, so to speak, so it's not blood. Genova leaves purple slime. It's still going to be blood in there as well, because I'm pretty sure a few scientists get killed in the process of this whole little
Right.
venture. Like it should have been a bit of both, I think. Do you know what I
It's
mean?
such a strange change. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
especially given the fact they've just kind of 180'd on it in intermission and put the blood in.
yeah,
It's like
completely strange. I don't know.
yeah, it's very strange. It's very strange. But it is, like I say, it is a good point, the linearity thing, because yeah, I do think they are going to try and drive the story as much as possible, and we're going to have opportunities to go off the beaten path, but I think they're going to be pretty few and far between until we get much later in the project, because you've got to think about it, like, a lot of the predictions are that we're only going to reach Nibelheim in this game, in part 2,
Mhm.
and not only for the length of game, like, I think that's going to be quite a long game if they upscale it to the same scale that they've done Midgar. But narrative-wise, Nibelheim sort of makes sense as a point to cut off. You know, a lot of stuff goes on there. You could insert a Sephiroth fight if you really, really, really wanted to, because he is there.
Mhm. Right.
So that's kind of the thing. But what happens then when you get to part 3? And because in part 2 they're going to make all the resources up to Nibelheim. What are they going to do? They're going to put all those resources in part 3 and then make the rest of the resources so that you can go back. Like, mechanically, it's quite an interesting concept how they're going to go about it.
Right.
It's a mad one.
I don't envy them their job. I'll say that. Like
It's ambitious.
it is the
Yeah.
choice of splitting up what is not, just a linear game
Yeah.
into this new format that's very sort of modern, and it creates a lot of difficulties. And
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not my problem.
We'll just sit back and watch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. But that is the end of the question. So hopefully it wasn't too painful.
No, it was good. The hardest one was the music one. Actually.
Yes, excellent. This is what I mean, like opinions like that. It is tough because there's so many different things that you can choose from and that you relate to and things like that. It's like, oh shit, you're gonna make me pick one. It's like when someone comes to you and says top 3 bands, it's like, go away.
Yeah, right.
How long have you got? I'm gonna need a week to figure this out.
Right. Yeah. These are sometimes they can be difficult. That's for sure.
Definitely. Oh no, but thank you very much for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Now, what I do is with everybody, I'm going to give you a quick 30 seconds. Have you got anything coming up in the near future or anything that you want people to check out? Any projects coming up?
Sure. So I'm just going to highlight MageCast. MageCast is relaunching. Man, if you're still interested, you're going to be the first guest on the relaunch.
Oh, excellent.
And yes.
I'm in.
All right. Episode 54 or something like that.
Nice.
But we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake a little even more in depth than we already did, hopefully. I felt like we covered some great ground in just this bit here. But hopefully I really want to dig into your brain and like get into some of the crazy stuff.
And we can go deep. We can go into Final Fantasy VII, like anything in the franchise. I'm up for. We'll even
All
talk
right.
Chrono Trigger for a bit if you want. I'm in.
Oh yes.
I am
All right.
in.
Well, that'll be great. So look for
Oh,
that in the coming weeks. Hopefully, I'll probably launch around the same time as you're launching this
yep.
series. So that'll be nice. We can kind of cross promote and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
So something to look for.
Yes, definitely. And like I say, all of the links are going to be in the description below. Make sure that you're checking everything out. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, all of the things. Do all of the things. But what we're going to do is we're going to put a wrap on this one today. So thank you very much for coming on today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget, like I say, like and sub. But more importantly than anything, have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.